Good evening and welcome to the Laughing Monkey Music Show. We have Angry Anderson back on tonight. We are going to go over some of his favorite records. And welcome to the show, man. How are you?
I'm good, brother. Thank you. I thought we'd start off and we'd drink a toast
Awesome.
to the late and great Dusty Hill. And I've
Early
got a
for me,
bourbon.
so I'll do coffee.
I've got a bourbon because the great story, one of the great stories of us and ZZ Top. And you'll notice in the list of top 10, there should be Trey Hombe's or at least a ZZ Top album in there, but it's hard to pick which is the better ones.
Yeah, I don't think one of them made it, did it? No, I didn't get it.
No. Oh. Because I thought we'd save it for the next when we do another 10.
Yes, please. I would love it.
Because when I sat down to make the list, I mean, there was about, as you would imagine, there's about 20 or 30 albums. I mean, I left off Joan Baez, and I just thought, when hearing the purity of her voice. Anyway,
it's hard.
To Dusty Hill, who taught me. Well, he and Billy and not so much Frank, but him and Billy, their first tour we did with them, introduced me to the delights of a bourbon with a beer chaser. And when we got to Texas, they took us to this bar in the middle of nowhere. It was a biker bar. And they had this fantastic band on. And as we pulled up in the cars, it had a big neon sign out the front, and it said beer. No, it said, beer, beef, bourbon, and boobs. And I thought, this is going to be a big night. And that's when I discovered the delights of it. I always loved bourbon, but I always remember that night because anyway, I'll tell you that story another time. It's a really good story. To Dusty.
Normally I'd have a beer, but it's only like 6 o'clock in the morning, and I would be considered an alcoholic if I was drinking beer at 6 o'clock in the morning. And then
I don't do that anymore. I do not do that anymore.
No.
In fact, I remember way back in the early days of the Tats. We would drink Bloody Marys in the morning.
Recovery.
Yeah. The hair of the dog.
Yep.
Righto. Now, I have my list. I gave you a list.
Yep, I went over it. I actually have a lot of those albums. This is gonna be fun.
So do you want to go through the 10, like starting from what you consider to be number one, or because I was wondering how we were going to do this, and I thought maybe we should do it chronologically. I mean,
let's do yours. We're just gonna do yours. I didn't do one because this actually is the same. I literally have almost all these actually on vinyl, and I love all these. So
okay, yeah.
Talk about these 10. It's hard to pick out, right? It's hard to pick out these albums. It's a deep dive. Then you're like, you start listening to stuff. Like it takes you on an adventure putting a list together.
Oh, mate, I just had so much fun putting the list together. Mm-hmm. And like I said, I ended up with about at least 30 albums. And
I'd love to have you back. We can do more. I love to talk about this stuff, especially with you.
Yeah, well, we will, because there was at another date, because there was some very, very when I say influential albums on me, they were influential in different ways. Like, I mean, Odetta is I had her on my list, and I think I told you that story the first time I heard Odetta sing.
Yeah,
was on the radio, and I didn't realize two things: that she was a female.
Yeah,
because she's got that beautiful, deep
voice,
beautiful, almost baritone voice, and I didn't realize she was black, but it didn't surprise me. There was another in the series, and they're on a label called Vanguard, I think, if memory serves me well, and I got a series of them. I had about half a dozen of them. I had very thick cardboard covers, and the Odetta one was heard live.
Oh, wow.
And I can't remember where, but the other one that of note, which I loved and still love to this day, was Pete Seeger and the Weavers at Carnegie. And I think Odetta might have been Carnegie as well. But when I say they were influential, they were inspiring albums. So I mean, beautiful songs. So we could probably, I mean, if you want to do that, we could probably talk about those kind of.
Yes. I love to deep dive too. And what'll happen is I'll go back and I'll say, I haven't heard this artist, and I'll go back and listen to it because I get exposed, from stuff like this. So I love it.
Mm.
You can do as many as you want. This is great. For this list you gave me, I actually went back because I have a lot of them vinyl. I had to went back and listen to all of them.
Yeah, really.
So much fun. I literally listened to all of them in between time because they're all great.
I went back I don't know where chronologically where they fit, so don't ask me to do the list in that order. But
no, I don't. Just do it whatever you want.
What I put down on the list was Vanilla Fudge, and Vanilla Fudge, the album Vanilla Fudge, is a great album. But the album that I used to listen to, I suppose, in that sort of really early out of it, so getting out of it, like smoking dope or taking acid or whatever, was their album Rock and Roll, which I don't think I put that on the list. I just put Vanilla Fudge.
Right. Yeah, the subtitle one.
Yeah, but that was one of those, and I think one of the great things, or one of the things I loved about a lot of those early American bands that I had on the list, Grand Funk Railroad and Timepiece, Young Rascals.
Yeah, that one made it to my list over. Yeah,
but and I always loved the ability that they were jamming bands, and the English bands didn't tend to that. They would in live performance,
right?
But they didn't often commit the jamming sort of
mentality,
exercise, if you like, to anything that they released. I think, but one of the albums, and we'll get to it. One of the greatest jams, one of the greatest live recordings for me, and it still brings tears to my eyes, is Nantucket Sleighride.
Yep.
But we'll talk about that later. So what album you would want to start with, Sean?
Well, let's talk. Well, no, you start with your Vanilla Fudge. That was good. That was 1967.
Yeah, I just loved everything about the Fudge. They hit me.
They were heavy. They were one of the first heavy bands, like first heavy pop bands. Like what I'm saying?
Yeah, and they weren't polite with their sounds. Their live recordings, which there's a lot of live material now, like on Google Tube. Wiki or whatever, you can find a lot of live stuff. I just think that, the sounds that they got in those days, there was nothing polite about the sounds. And, like in the lineup, there was Carmen Apiece, and actually, like when later on in that Faces era, they Beck, Carmen, and Apiece made one of the great that album. Beck, Carmen, and Apiece is an amazing, and I just love that album.
He's a monster. It was great. That everything you picked, the list you gave me for this time, is nothing goes over the age of 1973.
Yeah. Yeah, really.
Great. It is. It's between the years of had to write them down.
Yeah.
Just 67 to 73. So you have this list of 12 that you gave me this time is in that 6-year span, which is a really rich time for music, though. It really, really was. I mean,
Yeah.
you
But
can always look back and say
wonderful.
that.
They were wonderful bands because, like, talk about the Fudge and Humble Pie, which is one of my live at the Fillmore is like one of my all-time favorites. I mean, I think as a guitar player, he was because he was a guitar, he was a chord playing guitar player, and that's why a brilliant. I don't know how the coupling came about, but the brilliance of this young pop dude, Peter Frampton, who was an extraordinarily gifted guitar player.
Oh yeah.
So putting him in, as the foil, if you like, for this maniacal, obsessive, sort of possessed Stevie Marriott, and the wonderful rhythm section. Shirley and can't think of the other guy's name. But yeah, I mean that Humble Pie lineup that went on to do Smokin', which is one of my favourite albums of all time. They were unafraid to but Star Trekky, go where no bands had gone before,
Well, and that was just the beginning of Frampton too. I mean, so the album you're talking about was Humble Pie live at the Fillmore.
Yeah.
And in 71, this is for people that are following around. And I think the big lead off track that people would know if you don't know Humble Pie, and it's not, people know at least 30 Days in the Hole, but this one actually did I Don't Need No Doctor was probably the song that most people would know as a point of reference.
Yeah.
Which is a great song. And a lot of bands have covered it since then.
Yeah, everything that they did during their, when you say short-lived career, I mean, compared to other bands that, like the Stones and that, who have just endured the absurdly the test of time, so to speak. They've just
a few bands that have done
on.
that though. That've been that big and lasted that long. A lot of people, actually, a lot of bands on this list have had moments, but this is the high point. A lot of these bands is this time period that we have here.
Yeah, and I think that's what excited me about when I look at the list. I'm seeing bands, hearing bands the way that I did then. I mean, after I made the list out, I went back and take the Fudge. I went back and listened to their early albums and hadn't sat and listened to that music probably in 30 years. And it was just once I was sitting there with the headphones on and listening, and I thought, now I know why I love those albums, because they still make my heart beat harder. And they still give me the same, like I was listening to the Rascals, and oh Jesus, some of the vocal deliveries are just, but they were just like brash and brave and like going for it. Like we're doing something that's like, I don't think they sat around and articulated how important the contribution was that they were making, but they certainly realized it as a gut feeling. And it reminded me of the early days of the Tats. We were fearless. We just, just didn't care. I mean, if we wanted to play something, and there's a live recording, I only have it on cassette and I found this only about 5 years ago. So I'm going to have to bake all these things and commit them to sticks or whatever. But there's a really bad recording of the early Tats, and we did not push city limits. And it was fucking amazing. It was like, it was like, because it was Rose Tattoo playing, Tina Turner. I Can Tina Turner, and it was like fucking, yeah, it was just, Nutbush Tats playing Nutbush City Limits. I was like, yeah, we did. Anyway, I digress.
No, that's awesome. We actually, so talking about it was timepieces that you sent me of the Young Rascals,
Yeah.
1968. And the big hit off that was Good Lovin'.
How can I be sure?
And the thing with me is I never really did a lot. I listen to so much music, I couldn't possibly consume everything I hear and I like. So I took some time with this one. This is the one rare one I actually sat down and heard the whole album, but I had never listened to the whole album. So that was actually a bonus. And I found it a vocal powerhouse myself.
Oh,
I was pleasantly enjoying it because I knew the one song. But to sit down, just like you, put the headphones on and just listen, not do other stuff, just listen. You hear so much to all the nuances. It's beautiful. It's really enjoyable. It was.
And it was a one of the things that I love about those, and I was again the same experience as you had. Yeah. I went back and listened to those albums too. The clarity. I mean, the recording is not cluttered. And there's like this guitar,
Space.
drums,
right?
Guitar, drums, bass and Hammond. But the Hammond sound is as clear. And there's no distortion in it, and it's searing. It's just like, yeah, fuck yeah. It was just wow. I just thought, fucking, how good were these guys? And like I said, the same thing with Fudge, and the same thing with Grand Funk Railroad, and a few other bands too, like I fell in love with or rediscovered.
I love that.
The love that I had when I was first listening to those albums. They were very exciting. It was great music and great performances. And those guys could
good songwriting though too, right? I mean, the fact that you can have it
absolutely,
and less effects. So there is like a lot of space between the notes and the phrasing. And you can enjoy the music. It doesn't need a lot of extra stuff. It's a good song. A good song has space in it and air to breathe.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. Like it's like when you listen to the Doors. I mean, again, a jam band, a band that love to jam, love to explore.
No bass player.
Right? Yeah.
Just the left hand on the keyboard.
Yeah, it's just like it's like like. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's like some of the early Zeppelin stuff. He's playing foot pedals, and you just think to yourself, like, is that a bass guitar? No, it's not. He was playing keyboards and he was playing the bass lines. Sometimes he played guitar. I mean, a lot of the time he played guitar, but sometimes when he was playing live, that they wanted that keyboard bed, so he would play the bass. Yeah, play the bass lines with his feet. It was just like extraordinary, too dusty.
Too dusty. Yeah, I think with Zeppelin, the thing was neat about them is they got to a point where they did do a lot of extra dubbing and stuff because that's what Jimmy was into. But it was still very raw. You could still listen to early Zeppelin, and you can kind of you can hear the guitar, you can hear like little mistakes, you can hear you really break it down. So it really makes it still fun, even though there's a lot of overdubs in it. Yeah, tuning. Like it's very, it's really, some of it's off. I mean, before it's remastered, if you listen to the early ones when he was starting to do it, which I love. The imperfections are always the best.
Yeah, absolutely, without a doubt. And there's always the rule, Peter. There's always so if you make a mistake, next time it comes around, you play it again, just so it's not a mistake. But the other thing too is, it was easy for him because he being a slide player, but he actually part of his technique was that he would purposely play things that were just not right on. They were just shade one way or the other.
Yes.
Yeah, from the concert pitch, if you like, and it just made that sound that little bit more like, it's like it was just made it just tasty somehow. But anyway, I think one of the things that when I was reminiscing with our list, I was so grateful. I kept thinking to myself, like, I have to say this to you, that So I was very grateful for the idea that you said, well,
Oh,
go away and pick 10 albums or however many or
right.
whatever.
It's hard to do 10.
Because it gave me the opportunity to go back and listen to those albums and just
You're
think
welcome.
to myself, you know what, fuck me. Yeah, like I said, that's why I just rediscovered that.
Why you felt the music?
Oh, mate, there's some fantastic sounds on
Yeah,
those
I'm so glad.
albums.
I'm so glad. You're welcome. It's
Yeah.
doing this has been one of my favorite things, and I think that I don't think people realize all the artists that a certain type of artist likes, because of the style of music you like, they
Mm.
assume, or out
Mm.
what you like. You're like, no, you have no idea what really gets somebody going.
Mm.
And it's
Mm.
beautiful. I remember when I got my hearing aids years back, and I started listening to music again. I heard everything all over again. It literally, like you just said, it described it as like falling in love with music all over again. Like one of the best
Mm.
romances ever,
Mm.
because you
Mm.
just hear everything all over again. You're like, oh my God, oh my God.
Yeah.
For like
Yeah.
the longest time, you just have your headphones on, you're listening to everything all over again. It's so beautiful.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
these are great. I mean, you actually put up for a great jam band. While we're talking about jam bands, is Mountain Live.
Oh, God.
4 songs on one album. That's it. It's all you need,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because one of them's like what 20 minutes or something epic. Nowadays, some bands do that, but back then,
Well, with Sleighride, which is one of
right?
my favourite songs, but it's I think it's probably my favourite jam. And yes, they did have movements that they played every
Right.
night, the sections or whatever I call them movements, and they'd worked out that this was a great riff, and they would jam on that for a while, and then there'd be a signature or there'd be some sort of signal or whatever, or even if it was just a nod across the stage, and then they
Yeah.
would change into the next part. But some of those musical passages in the jam, when they're just free flowing, free forming, and once I understood what the Nantucket Sleighride was, or what inspired the song, I mean, obviously the lyrics give it away because it's kind of almost like a lyrical version of Moby Dick, but sort of with the different characters portrayed as part of the crew. And but the guitar playing, and well, it's not just guitar playing, the band. When you listen to it, and I was obsessed with this album when I first heard it, because to me Leslie West is, like he's right up there with Billy Gibbons and like Ronnie Wood is some of the best guitar players that
Oh
just
yeah.
just reduce me to blubbering sort of like I can listen to them endlessly, and I've got everything that I could possibly put my hands on that Leslie West has ever done, and or Billy Gibbons and or a handful of other people like that. But yeah, I just think the flow, okay, to use C terms, the ebb and the flow, the amazing heights that it reaches, when they're really, really going for it. And Papalati's just like fucking maniacal, there's just this fantastic fuzz sort of bassy thing that he got going.
You can tell they've been playing
And,
for a long time. That there's moments of genius that are just happening at that moment when they recorded it too. You can tell. I mean,
it's just that particular performance is inspired. It's
it's
inspired,
fantastic.
and I have it on good authority. And I mean, it's I don't want to find out that it's not true, but apparently that was just a jam. And I've heard, I mean, on the net, there's probably a dozen. I've collected, different versions of Nantucket Sleighride
Mm-hmm.
off the net. That they've, like one's in Hamburg, the other one's in Dusseldorf, and there's another one in London, and there's one in Texas, and there's one in blah blah. So there's all these different versions of Nantucket Sleighride, and they're not all identical. So they
I think
didn't.
it's live. It's a jam
Yeah.
at that moment. I think that was a moment catcher. I think it's a special lightning in a bottle moment caught live with them. It was 72. I don't think there was bands are doing that much overdubbing. I think you're right, spot on. I think it's pretty much live.
Yeah. Yeah.
They may have just some
Well,
EQ balancing, but that's probably it.
I definitely want to believe that till I go to the grave. I just think that, like the times that the countless amount of times that I have lay there, even in, like touring, like you go to bed and you put the headphones on and in your bunk, and, and the times that I have listened to Sleighride and just, I've had a bit of beer and bourbon on board, but I've been reduced to tears. I just think it's such a beautiful piece of music,
Even the concept though, such a lot of bands were doing that back then. Now they have more concept proggy pieces. To do a big piece and have a concept behind it like that, a story.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm saying it was different back then too.
Oh yeah.
You props to that's a whole. It was totally out in left field for them.
Yeah.
For a band that was making it that much better. It's not just like now it's like any band does a 20-minute song. I'm like, no, you don't understand. This is 1972. There's four songs and these were concepts, and it's not a prog band. It's like really a rock band that clearly played their life in clubs because they're so tight that it's just a live recording.
Yeah.
And it's Leslie West.
Yeah, they could have done 5 nights, like 5 different gigs and got 5 extraordinarily good live recordings. Because as you said, they lived their lives in playing the clubs, and so they played every night. So they were that good, and to make it, and like the Tats have always done that to this day to make it interesting, so that we retain the passion and we retain, the maniacal, intensity. Like I was watching this after our talk, our last time we did speak.
Yeah.
I went back and I was listening to. There's a whole lot of black and white. Obviously, there's a whole lot of black and white material around of the early days of Little Richard and Jerry Lee Lewis and Gene Vincent and those performances were, because they were that experience was new then, and they were just that you can tell, you can feel that they were as amazed by it themselves as the audience would have been watching it and listening to it. It's kind of like I just was going to try and sing the melody then of the Pies version of Walk On. Is it Silver Splinters? What's the title of that song? Dun, 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 dun.
I think I know what you're saying. I'm not as sharp first thing in the morning.
Yeah, it's a Frampton song, and he sings it, and it's just the jamming in it. It's just like, just amazing stuff. It's just like you just think like, wow, these guys were just, okay, it's so glib to say that they were groundbreakers, they were pioneers. And of course they were.
But they are. All these are, and that's the thing. Every artist back then, for all this type of stuff, it was like the first time certain things were done.
Yeah.
It's true. It's not even glib. We're looking at a time period from 67. You actually had it from 67 to 73. Those 6 years, and those were big years for the Beatles. Those were big years for Hendrix.
Absolutely.
These were huge years. These are some of the Stones' best years. I mean, we have phases of the Stones, and the early 60s, the 60s to 70s, early good. Then they had some dirty, really great rock and roll years in the 70s. We had a couple moments in the 80s where they were in fluorescent clothes, where we don't talk about. But they had some good comebacks again and some good tours. But these are some of the best times. Floyd you have on here. I mean, so this is a time period of, it's not glib, it's groundbreaking music.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
the other thing too is that putting myself back in that time, I remember, we used to have I love this. We used to have, like, you'd probably call them listening parties.
Yeah.
But we would get together and there'd be, 3 or 4 of us, or sometimes there'd be as many as, 6, 8, 10 people, boys and girls, couples, and whatever. and we'd all get really stoned, and we'd be drinking a bit, and smoking a bit of dope, and maybe two or three of us would be tripping and whatever, and we would just play all night. Very little dancing. I mean, there were some albums where just everyone just got up and danced because that was just the vibe, like it was dance music. But you'd sit around in a chair and just because, like we had everyone in those days was putting together, like sound systems, and we had like
early hi-fi tectonic.
We'd have like, I remember Mangy Mick, who was the guy who nicknamed me Angry. We had 4 big speakers, like with big, like a 12 in it and a 10 and a couple of maybe 5s as tweeters or whatever.
Jeez.
And, they would stand like, higher than my waist. Big fucking, like big speakers. And then there'd be a series of small ones. Like I remember we put speakers like in the corners, like not obscured entirely, but like we tilt them back, like so that they were leaning back against the wall, right. So the sound threw upwards. So even though there was a chair in front of it, like an armchair or whatever, it didn't block the sound. The sound was going up over it. We experimented with sound, because we were getting into, the whole vibe, and we would just play album after album after album, and just people we were so inspired is gets you kind of part way there.
Yeah.
It was more than being inspired. It was
like you could share it together though too. You know what I mean? It was community, and let's face it, music is, besides an emotional conduit, it's also a huge piece of community. It's communal. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Concert shows. So the fact you guys could sit down and share that's special. No one does it nowadays.
I think the closest you get these days is, and I'm not belittling it. I'm certainly not being judgmental about it, but I mean, there's lots of times when, we've always had, because, my 4 kids are, the spacings in their ages are such that, there's always been young people in and around the house, always. And the great thing about my kids is that they share all their friends, right? From the youngest with his friends, and then Blaine, and then Galen, and then Roxy was 5 years old. So they had this cross section of age, if you like. So there was always young people, and they have their music in the background, but it's always background. It was never. I've never seen them do what we were talking about how they were just.
But you're probably still the strongest influence in the house all through those years. Like I was still the one, even as an adult. Hey guys, here's Frank Zappa. Here, all my kids know all the words to Billy the Mountain, all 20 minutes of it, and they're all in elementary school, right? And then like the other day, my daughter, who's graduated now, like did all the lyrics to me. Like she still remembers them.
Wow.
But that's what I'm saying. As an adult, yeah, I agree with you. I was still the one playing and influencing. And a lot of the music my kids have, some of it branched out, but the basis of a lot of the bands I listened to was from stuff they heard from me.
Yeah.
But I can't say a lot of stuff they've given back to me though, musically.
The thing about it's like my kids. The 3 boys have been performed. They've all performed at different stages of their lives. And Galen was always into, and he was a great performer. I don't know why he never ever did anything, but it was just, it was one of those things. It was a choice he made. But he was more that early style because he's the eldest boy.
Mm-hmm.
And his great inspiration was Eminem and that time period, right? So, and then Blaine, who's the only one left here at the moment with me, and he's more your sort of R&B. The stuff that he writes and records is very melodic. And
Love that.
Liam was the he was the master of freeform. He did a lot of busking and a lot of freeform stuff. Freeform as in just letting it happen on the moment. But and he was very clever that way. But he also wrote some, I've had a look at his books of his lyrics, because out of the three, he recorded the least, but he wrote the most. So he's got, there's books and books of lyrics that it's a shame that he never got the chance to, put them down to tracks. But he was very, very not political, but he was like most good lyricists. He was a real observer. He used to, when I've looked at his books, his lyrics and his stories, and he had an eye for seeing the moments in this contemporary world that he lived in, or the life that he lived in, and he was able to write it down very, very accurately. And so he there was a lot of social comment, is what I'm saying.
That's a good songwriter to do that.
Yeah, he it's a damn shame that he never got the chance to record more. But I even said to the boys one time, I said, if one of the, one of the things you're going to do if you win the lottery, I said, yeah, really. I said, I think what we'll do is we'll go into a studio with some musos that I know, very talented players, and we'll put some of his lyrics to music, and so that they get a chance to live in the musical form. Yeah. But how do we got talking about that?
Because we're talking about kids and music and life. That's how it goes.
Yes. Yeah.
This show is about music and life. It's not just it's rock and roll. You just know rules. You should know that. Nice boys don't play rock and roll. So this is a conversation we're having. This is not an interrogation.
No, exactly right. I think one of the nice things about when you can communicate, on our level,
yeah,
with your kids, as you were saying about, your daughter remembering lyrics, etc.
Yeah,
we've introduced our children to our music, and because they're into music, they're not, it's not like they're politically sort of one-eyed, like a lot of people, that are into politics. I mean, particularly these days, politics has become very a divisive thing, whereas music's a very uniting thing.
Mm-hmm.
And they talk about inclusiveness and equality and all those kind of stuff, and those sort of things have always been part of music. I mean, there was, there've always been elements that make.
Well, every artist is so different. I mean, and so I'm a big fan. As I showed you earlier, picture of Beatles. Now, another band that my kids grew up listening to a lot.
Yeah.
Because and the lyrics and the different. So you're right. I mean, there's not gonna be a time where my kids are gonna be able to sit down with theirs or whatever and play certain stuff like that, because music is not the same anymore. You cannot. Like I said, my kids have heard, Steely Dan. A lot of these things they've heard in the car or at home with me. My kids know how to use a record player. Some kids don't even know what a record player is.
Yeah, really.
It's like a
spaceship or a laser gun. That.
Yeah.
I'll tell you a funny story about that.
Yeah.
And it was Liam, my youngest, and anyway, he's in my room. He'd been in my room, like 1,000 times, if not 100, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And he'd always walk past the radiogram. So I've got an old, like a 60s radiogram, with the tops. And
oh, wow.
one side's a radio, and then there's a middle section where all the albums go.
Yeah.
And then there's a record player. And anyway, he comes into my room one day and he goes, "Oh, that's cool." Well, I don't know what was playing, but he said, "Oh, that's cool, Dad." I said, "Yeah, that's blah blah." And he said, "Oh, yeah, really?" And because the sound was coming out of the radiogram. So I pulled the lid up to change the record, right? And he's looked in there and he's gone, "What's that?" I said, "Yeah, he was probably 12 years old or whatever." I said, "What's an album?" And I took the arm off and I took the album out. And I said, "There's music on this." So I said, "Have a look, the grooves, right?" And I said, "That's music." It's I couldn't explain. I said, "There's a needle and it's grooves in the,
that's a whole other layer with somebody has 10 records in their life that doesn't know what it sounds like. Go explain to them. Let them learn how a record actually works. That just
their experience and this is the part of the story. This is where it really I got it then. Their experience with turntables is scratching.
Yep.
He looked at the turntable and he said, "So there's songs on these things?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, I said, when they put, like on a what they're doing, they're taking a section, right? They're letting one side play, and they're like percussion by jerking the record on a given phrase or whatever, and they're using that as a repetitive thing, right? So his concept of a turntable was just that.